Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. The world of Destiny is ending. Or, well, is it? At least, it certainly isn't if you see us defeating the Witness in the final shape. For now, though, let's all run with the assumption that we do actually manage to survive the Witness. What happens next? This isn't the first time I've talked about this question, but with Into the Light, we can start to see what the more human side of that might look like, and we can start to approach that question with a more serious tone. I'm not looking at the big Destiny 3 question, that's another video. I'm looking at what happens to humanity and the people of Sol, and that's actually a topic that we have a bunch of lore on thanks to the Into the Light update. And the good news is that assuming we do survive, there is potentially a bright future for humanity and all those other forces that live within Sol, assuming we can defeat our greatest foe yet. The future is still unclear, but it seems more likely than not that a possible reunification or close alliance of humanity within the system of Sol is possible, and with that, a greater human presence could be established. This wouldn't be some nation-state built solely for a single group, but could be the start of an empire that represents a new age of progress, where the many peoples of Sol might once again see an echo of the Golden Age's grandeur returning once more. So, let's go ahead and talk about that today in the lore. So again, let's clarify with some context. Sol will just not be a human-only system anymore when it is rebuilt. There are countless alien species in Sol, from the Awoken to the Eliksni to the remnants of the Cabal. The lore adequately demonstrates that this is not just our system anymore, it belongs to a multitude of people. Lots of people call this place home. And this, I think, is best demonstrated by the lore of the Eliksni. There are excerpts from hidden reports on the state of the cultural degradation of Eliksni society since their long drift and exodus from Reese, their homeworld that was conquered by the Witness and the Black Fleet. The cultural degradation isn't just something that was reflected in practices such as the docking of Dreg's arms upon their demotion, or the change of houses from groups with cultural ties that closely knit their talents to their community into warring bands of pirates. No, instead, it also makes commentary on the idea that newly born Eliksni in Sol feel no connection to their old homeworld of Reese at all. And, I mean, that makes sense. They've never known Reese. Why should they feel connected to a place that has never given them its bounty, that they have never known, and that is honestly likely to be destroyed, potentially forever? In short, regardless of what you think, this place is home to all the species that live here properly now. It might currently be lawless, and we absolutely should look to defeat and expel hostile elements within the system that cannot be reasoned with, such as the Hive, but our solar system isn't just a place for humanity anymore. Even those humans born in the Last City need to grapple with the fact that, well, they're not the Last City, and they're not representative of the whole of humanity. They were never representative, in fact. Hawthorne is proof of that. The story of the Last Word and the people who lived in towns like Palamon is also proof of that. Whilst the Last City beneath the Traveler has always existed since its time of creation, near the beginning of the Dark Age, there is certainly still a point to be made that human settlements have always existed apart from it. And yes, they weren't as well protected by Guardians, and yes, they had a tougher time surviving, but we need to stop thinking of the Last City and its human population as the only constituent of Sol that matters. Breaking that assumption is even easier now because, I mean, we have two other major settled peoples that are close cousins of humanity on Earth, some of which we can probably call our immediate kin. I am of course talking about the Awoken of the Reef and the human population of Neomuna on Neptune. So no matter how you slice it, the solar system doesn't belong to any one group of people. But that's why it's so encouraging to see some of the new lore that was released in Into the Light. It touches on that possibility of these different groups working together. And in particular, there are a couple of Grimoire cards which, yes, finally, you can get in-game. Man, it feels good to say that sentence. Anyway, these Grimoire cards are Last City news reports, and in particular, they have been created by an organization known as the City Herald. Probably just a newspaper. That's the way the cuttings tend to read. That being said, it talks about the possibility of these groups working together, and in particular, speaks about the Awoken and the Neomuni. Before we do touch on those Grimoire cards though, I think it's worth noting that there is some more minor lore about other factions and how they've integrated. In particular, I think it's important to note that there is a grimoire card talking about the Eliksni of the House of Light, and how they are properly integrated into the city now as well. They even have a notice at the Eliksni's lore card saying that if there is any breach in an ether tank, which, reminder, those are very explosive, it needs to be reported immediately to the security forces in the city so that it can be patched. Which shows that, hey, their infrastructure isn't hostile and alien to us anymore. It is a part of our own infrastructure. It needs to be maintained. It's no different than seeing a bridge start to crumble. It needs to be sorted then and there. And also, there are notes about how the Last City itself is looking to potentially organize a new election for its consensus. For those of you who don't know, the consensus is the group within the city that governs its politics, and back in the day it was formed of a council that predominantly saw the speaker overseeing a mix of factions that represented mortal-lived people and the Guardians, who were represented by the Vanguard. There was a core consensus council, as well as another group which allowed all thoughts and opinions to be heard from other factions that weren't so well represented. So you had this core group, which originally was represented by groups such as New Monarchy, Dead Orbit, and the Concordat, and then you had groups on the satellite fringes of it, such as the Future War Cult at the time, who eventually would ascend, and other groups such as the Symmetry, who followed the ideas of Ulan Tan. So, with all that in mind, a new set of elections for the consensus is going forward, and those elections are actually much more mortal-centric, I think is the word I would use. Mortal-centric because, yes, Guardian forces are being represented, but we've essentially seen the two Vanguard commanders of the Warlocks and the Titans rule the city for the last however many years. Since the death of the Speaker and the departure of the factions, we've seen that, well, the Lost City has basically been run by a military dictatorship. And nobody is actually happy about that, including Ikora and Zavala. They are leaders, yes, but they're not political leaders. And so there are people who are campaigning to be representatives of the city, and it's varied people. So yeah, even within the city's own bounds, we're starting to see new progress being made, and a reunification and a realignment of human values is coming to pass. There are political candidates rising from this particular set of standards, and I imagine that we'll see some of these names become relevant in the future. But again, that's all the homegrown local stuff. Let's look at what the City Herald has to say about the Awoken and the Neomuni. And let's start with what was said about the Neomuni in an article which actually gives us a glimpse of hope in its very title. In fact, it's called United in Hope, Our Neighbors in Neomuna. It reads as follows. By Emmanuel Utkin, staff writer at the City Herald. Confirmation of a human settlement on Neptune was one of several shocking revelations over the course of recent years. Its discovery marks a sea change in our collective access to Golden Age information and technology long thought to be lost. Perhaps more importantly, it heralds potential reconnection with the rest of our people. Who are these Neomuni? Are they anything like us? Real-time communication between Neomuna and Earth is still stymied by the logistics of crossing enemy lines, in addition to Neomuna's communications restrictions. Data transmissions from Neomuna are strictly controlled and scrutinized for Vex corruption. Therefore, Vanguard sources provided assistance contacting Neomuni citizens. We asked willing individuals to share their perspectives on the possibilities of a long-awaited reunion with Earth. Despite the dangers, many Neomuna denizens are optimistic about the curtain coming down someday in the future. A brief selection of their thoughts follows. I don't know how things would have shaken out if we'd stayed on Earth. Maybe we wouldn't have the Cloud Arc or nanotechnology, but if we make it through this fight with the Witness, I think it's only fair we send over, what we have on food production, terraforming. There's a whole planet to reclaim. I'd love to read some New Earth literature. I always assumed that the stories we managed to bring with us were going to be the last of their kind. Does anyone over there like good detective stories? It's been interesting to see the Guardians at work. Is everyone on Earth like that, going at Mach 12 all the time? Stay tuned for continued coverage, including a guest feature from Neomuna's very own Jisoo Colorondo. So if nothing else, the probably greatest and most promising thing here is that we can see humanity's future has bright sentiments about it. Neomuna's benevolence to the people of Earth is an about turn from their previous stance, where they believed Earth and all its people to be ruled by savage warlords and despots, individuals who they still called warlords despite the moniker Guardian being closely used. It's clear that the actions of the Guardians on Neomuna have had a profound impact on that perception of who they are and what they do and what they stand for. The Neomuni will need to rewrite the stories that they've told about us and reacquaint themselves with some of the history of Earth that they've missed, lest they forget that technically it's also their own. Regardless, the big deal is that the Neomuni seem to be willing to share their significantly advanced technology with us. That alone all but guarantees that Earth is slowly going to be reclaimed for humanity, the forces of the Coalition, and any others who would call it home in a civilized manner. The House of Light benefits from this. Any Cabal who choose to stay on Earth and integrate themselves into society will benefit from this. The Earthborn Awoken will benefit from this. Sol will hopefully become a livable and prosperous place again, a place where the brutal zero-sum game of the Dark Age-style existence that it's known for some time may eventually become a thing of the past, something we don't necessarily need to participate in anymore. The prosperity of Sol, however, is something that needs to be built on guarantees of security as well. The hives still exist in the system, hostile elements of the Witness's forces do too, and there is danger around almost every corner, meaning that some zones are just not safe for you unless you have significant firepower, be you an FOTC member, be you a Cloudstrider, be you an Awoken Corsair, or be you a Guardian. With the Awoken Corsairs in mind, they are one of the powers within the system that have great military strength. I would say that aside from the Guardians and Keitel's own Imperial forces, they are the greatest military power. This is to say nothing of the advanced auxiliary forces that they bring to bear in the form of their Techians and Mara Sov's own paracausal abilities. So, it's good to see that the last city, according to the City Herald, has been seen cooperating with them a lot more on the military front. It also tells us about how the Corsairs have hopes that we'll continue to cooperate in the future. Take a listen to this article, Visitors Out of Dreams, Changing Reef Relations. By Leah Terrazas, political correspondent at the City Herald. Recent strategic summits between Queen Mara Sov of the Awoken and the Vanguard have provided our citizens with the rarest of honors, a glimpse of our Awoken neighbors. The city has hosted a small Awoken population for centuries, but reef-born subjects of the Queen were more commonly contained to Awoken settlements and outposts within their own territory. The Queen's secrets were guarded zealously, and prior relations with the city often bordered on hostility. In the face of common threats, however, this isolationist policy has since softened. For today's citizens, the arrival of Awoken Corsairs is a minor spectacle. "I just know it's some sort of divine monarchy," one local commented. "How are we supposed to keep up with everything in Sol these days? But they sure look impressive." Initial impressions of the Awoken Corsairs appear to be positive, with several residents describing them as disciplined, worldly, and surprisingly grounded. "We made a choice to help Earth long ago," said one Corsair. "I'm glad we can do so openly." While the imminent battle for the Traveler is foremost on everyone's minds, several Corsairs noted their hopes for continued cooperation, especially given rumors of a resurgence of the infamous Ahamkara. As another Corsair put it, "There's a lot we're going to have to figure out together in a hurry." Interesting note there at the end on the Ahamkara, of course. Now, I don't want to get my hopes up here, but I'm now waiting to see where all of that goes. Nothing binds people together like common enemies, and our common enemy may well be about to fall. But in the case of the Awoken, the Neomuni, and the people of the Last City, there is more in common to us than just a single foe. We're all bound by a common lineage, and we're all looking for a future where there's a promise of prosperity. Between the three groups, there is some significant power that has been attained. The Awoken have ancient knowledge and technology that dates all the way back to the Distributary. They also have the ability to access the realms beyond our own, the immaterial planes of the Ascendant Realm, and with that in mind, they have knowledge that many would never be able to access, a degree of paracausality that leaves them lying between the light and the dark. The Neomuni, on the other hand, are built intimately into the Veil and their Cloud Ark, and so they have their own technological feats to display. But also, they are closely connected to the Vex network. This has allowed them to advance their own technology in alternate directions, leading to the rise of the Neomuni version of nanite fluid that we see, which originated from Siva and was improved with either the use of or inspiration from Vex Radiolaria. The truth of that matter is still a little too close to call, if I remember correctly. However, this people's primary connection to an artifact of darkness that empowers the very power of Strand itself means that they are also intimately connected with a paracausal power. And then, of course, the people of the Lost City may lack technology, but they don't lack resolve and they don't lack strength, as proven by the presence of not only the many FOTC forces that have held the wall over the years, but of course also the Guardians of the Lost City and their connections to the power of the light. Of course, Guardians can wield darkness now as well, and they freely roam within the system wherever they seem to please. But it's worth remembering that the Lost City didn't fall to Gaul's forces until the Traveler was taken. The light has always been our shield, and it's always been a powerful thing for people to have to consider when trying to take the city. If these three groups were to combine, along with the Elixni forces of the House of Light and any cabal of Keitel's ascendancy that might choose to live in Sol on a more permanent basis, we might see the beginnings of a truly marvelous alliance starting to take place. An alliance built on a simple idea, that this is our home. Sol's prosperity will never truly be assured. The prosperity of any solar system in this galaxy, in this universe in fact, is almost certain to always be in question. There are powerful forces that can wipe away worlds within the span of seconds. And yet, here, in this moment, even as the actions of the Witness tip the universe itself towards a final shape from which it would never recover, there is a real possibility that the factions within Sol will set down their swords when this fight is done and turn them into plowshares together so that they can all work more closely and reunify. If the reunification of Sol does take place, then we won't see the creation of some greater human empire. We will see perhaps the creation of something greater than even that. It will hopefully be the rise of a very simple idea, that we can now all choose to live in peace with one another and seek prosperity. It will be the ultimate rebuttal to Toland's idea of a gentle place ringed in spears ultimately being vulnerable. The spears will have been enough, and we can now turn them back from weapons into tools of peace. One great nation under one great banner. There's no telling what we might accomplish. But that's all stuff we'll have to figure out in Destiny's future, and it all lies beyond the possibilities of the final shape. We'll have to see if we actually can defeat the Witness. With all that said though, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like and let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments section. Do you reckon that when the Witness is dead, the Coalition will disband? Do you think that there is a possibility that we will just grow closer and continue to work for our mutual defense and benefit? Considering the fact that there are enemies such as the Hive Gods who are still likely to wreak havoc upon our populations, I foresee closer cooperation with our allies continuing, especially the likes of Keitel, Mithrax, and Mara Sov. There are still threats that will bind us together, and I still think that there is a possibility that we will ultimately see a greater reunified Sol. But that's all my speculation. Let me know yours. And of course, if you want more Destiny content leading up to and beyond the final shape, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.